Today, I want to talk to you about an area that will help you to obtain breakthrough, prosperity, success, and happiness no matter what you're facing in life. You know, many today are struggling, and some are focused on the negativity and the things that are happening in the planet that are less than desirable. But it's our commitment that we're going to focus on good things, think on good things, and stay on the positive side of life and see the will of the great I am done in this planet as it is in heaven. So, what I want to talk to you about today is removing psychological roadblocks to wealth. Removing psychological roadblocks to wealth. Now, when I say wealth, I'm not just talking about money. However, money is a part of it. Scripture says, Beloved, I wish above all things that you may prosper and be in health, even as your soul prospers. So, a truly wealthy individual has a prosperous life. Material prosperity, of course, is good. And he also has a healthy life. Prosperity, a part of prosperity is health. And then he has, or she has, ladies, a prosperous soul. In fact, the prosperous soul is the foundation for all of this prosperity that we're talking about. The soul is the mind, the will, and the emotions. And this is why it's important that we understand how to deal with the psychological side of life. In fact, my major is in psychology, and even as I speak now, I'm engaged in a class on social psychology at the collegiate level to, keep sharpening the saw, because I think it's so important that we understand psychology, and a part of my mission and goal is to teach the psychology of the Bible. Now, some say there is no psychology to the Bible, but there is. The Greek word for soul, one word is suke, and we get our word psychology from it. If you think of the word suke, that's a Greek word now, and I do know a little Greek. He runs a delicatessen downtown. All right, just a little humor. But Greek brings out that psychology is biblical, psychology is good, and psychology must be understood. So the prosperous soul is a soul that understands biblical psychology. Now, of course, I'm not talking about all kinds of weirdness that is not in line with the thinking of the great I am and the thinking of Scripture. But the Bible has been given to help you get your psychology right. That's why we call this the Atlanta New Thought Center for right thinking. And right thinking is a big part of it. All right, all that said, let's talk about these psychological roadblocks to wealth. And we're going to continue to draw on Millionaires of the Bible, the series I've been teaching from. And we are studying the millionaires of Genesis. We said that the word Genesis means becoming or emerging. And this means that you and I are in a constant process of becoming or emerging as the rich, radiant substance when we recognize it with our minds. And what are you saying? Well, you prosper. You live in health. You become more radiant as you recognize truth with your mind. See, Scripture has been given to prosper the soul. to prosper the mind and to prosper the will and, of course, the emotions. And when you do that, you have a prosperous life. So, what are we doing? We're teaching that you may prosper. However, we must remove psychological blocks. Sometimes we have psychological blocks to a word, for instance, and that psychological block to that word may hold you back. Like some people, as soon as they hear prosperity in the context of spirituality or church or teaching, some people just have a psychological roadblock because they think about the pastor that maybe overdid it in this area. And I'm not here to judge anybody, but I believe we need to use wisdom and do the right thing with the resources of this planet, that we need to be good and wise stewards. Yet on the other hand, being a good steward doesn't mean be broke and be cheap and be stingy. So you got to be like Jesus. And Jesus lived a life of prosperity. But his whole life of prosperity was never around what he possessed himself. His life of prosperity was a life of generosity. He was a generative being. He generated food to feed the multitudes, generated even wine from the water at the wedding, and generated health through his healing power and all that. So really, we prosper so that we help others to prosper. Paul, the apostle, said, as being poor, yet making many rich. So the real objective is that we teach people how to prosper. And the real joy of a true shepherd and a true teacher is not his own prosperity, but the prosperity of the people. Does that make sense? All right, so some of you may have had experiences in life where certain things happen to cause you to put up psychological blocks. And as soon as you hear a word, again, like prosperity, in a church or a spiritual context, you go back to the guy that missed the mark. Okay, and our desire is to pray that all prosper, and we're not here to put anybody else down. Again, I think we've got too much judgment and too much criticism. It's time to love and support and pray for peace in the lives of people, in the lives of cities, states, and nations. And that's my motive. Anyway, let's talk some about this now. Man, first of all, seeks unlimited bounty or unlimited prosperity. It is actually the innate desire of every normal human, meaning every normal human. Now listen to this. Every normal human, if you are normal, you want to prosper. Now, wouldn't you agree with that? If you say, oh no, I don't want to prosper, I just want to struggle through life. I think life is a struggle. Well, you're living on the wrong side of life because, again, that ye may prosper is the will of the great I am. So it's normal to seek unlimited bounty, and it's the innate desire of every normal human. So you are normal. Nothing wrong with you seeing that nice sports car and saying, wow, it'd be nice to drive one like that. Or seeing that nice home and saying, wow, it'd be good to live in a home like that. Or that job, that income, or whatever, that nice watch or piece of jewelry. That's normal for you to want those things. We want the good stuff, don't we? Nothing short of unlimited supply can really satisfy an individual on this planet. Now, I know you may accept your lot in life, but deep within, you've got that gnawing saying, there's more. And that has been put there by your Father, a loving Father a loving Father came up with the idea of prosperity in the first place. Because remember, in Genesis, he saw that all things were good, and these things were very good. He even used the superlative. So, since it's God's idea, the idea of the great I am, I think it's time for us to take the limits off of our thinking and to expect unlimited supply. But the key is, as we teach today, that you got to deal with the psychological roadblocks that come to you regarding prosperity. Because sometimes you're resisting your own prosperity because you have roadblocks built up in your mind. Now, what is a roadblock? If you've watched old movies before where they were trying to catch a criminal, like maybe Al Capone. I remember once when I was a kid and I saw one of those movies, and at the end of the movie, Al Capone was shot dead, and it was all kinds of crazy stuff. Mickey Rooney, if I recall right, was in the movie. And anyway, you saw people shot and dying, and man, that was one of the first movies I'd seen where someone was actually shot with a gun and died. And that image just stayed in my mind all day the next day and the next 2 or 3 days. But now, people watch so much violence that it's become the norm in their thinking. But anyway, in some of those movies, they would be trying to stop the criminal, the gangsters, as we called them. So they'd set up a roadblock. And a roadblock would be composed of maybe barriers, cars parked across the road, policemen standing there just waiting for this criminal to be trying to escape by going that way. Well, when you run into a roadblock, you're done. And they shot up your car and all that stuff if you tried to get away. But a roadblock, you could simply say, is something that stops you. So a psychological roadblock stops the action of your mind, which moves you towards prosperity. The roadblock removes you away from prosperity. Because when you're running up to the roadblock, of course, if you see it, you try to turn around and get out of there. Is that right? So what are we saying? Through the action of your mind, you can form unlimited amounts of wealth by developing what we call a prosperous soul. Now, a prosperous soul is a mind that is intent and focused on prosperity and not blocked by negativity, by thoughts of poverty. Because, some of the greatest problems you face financially are right between your two ears. But we tend to think the problems are external. But the problems are not external, they are internal. Esoteric, if you would. Esoteric means from within. And there's an old saying, as within, so without. And scripture teaches, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. So if you're thinking poverty in your heart, what are you going to have in your life? If you're thinking not enoughness in your heart, what are you going to have in your life? Well, on the other hand, if you're thinking abundance in your heart, if you're thinking prosperity in your heart, if you've developed a prosperity consciousness, what are you going to have in your life? You're going to have prosperity. Because the stuff being produced in your life is being produced through your soul. That's why I started this new teaching I call soul food. Because we need to feed our souls. We need healthy souls. Soul growth. Sila. The more you employ the inner laws of prosperity and uphold their abundance, the more you will appreciate the beauty and freedom that are a part of it. Our purpose on this planet, a part of our purpose on the planet. I used to be one trying to figure out all the purpose and the exact details of what everyone should be doing. But you have to learn that, each person has to work out their own salvation, work out their own walk. But I know a general part of the purpose of Homo sapiens, human beings, on this planet is learning how to work with invisible substance. Now, I want to talk some about substance. Of course, Scripture says now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And the more you employ the inner laws of prosperity and unfold their abundance, the more you appreciate the beauty and the freedom that are a part of it. Meaning, when you start to live from within and employ these inner laws of prosperity, you start to see a beauty in life. For instance, you're not trying to get wealth by tricking, cajoling, or cheating other people. It's being produced from within. And that's the way the master, the teacher, the great one, Jesus lived. He didn't have to rob a bank to feed the multitude. He generated food by looking up into the realm of ever-expanding good, which we call heaven, and blessing, which means to say something good about the little boy's lunch, and it multiplied. Now that's beauty, and that's freedom, and you don't have to feel bad. You don't have to feel like you wasted somebody's money or whatever. So, all that said, now let's talk about the word millionaire. And the question is, we're teaching on millionaires of the Bible, millionaires of Genesis, and their prosperity secrets. Are you afraid of the word millionaire? Now think about that for a moment. Don't go to a snap judgment on me, quick judgment. Oh no, I'm not afraid of the word millionaire. I want to prosper. But, many people are afraid of that word, and they even tried to tone the word down. Like, for instance, I heard of one church, and they were teaching about prosperity. And they basically called it How to Become a Spiritual Millionaire. Well, I'm talking about how to become a literal millionaire, not a spiritual millionaire. Sometimes religious phrases such as that are simply used to help us to kind of soften the blow of words like millionaire. But my advice is do not try to tone the word down, because now you're creating a psychological roadblock to your own wealth. In fact, if you're doing that, stop. Because you want to unleash abundance in your own life. And abundance is yours by divine right. You've got to deal with the inner conflicts to being a millionaire or being prosperous, being successful. The inner conflicts must be resolved. Why? Because faith always claims what belongs to faith. Faith is just the opposite of doubt. Faith is specific. Faith removes the question mark of is this good, is this God, should I have it? So you got to deal with the psychological roadblock to the word millionaire. Think with me. I just want to be a loving teacher of simple truths to awaken prosperity in you. And one must learn to be honest and admit, that you're seeking unlimited bounty. Admit that this is your mentality. Admit that you're developing prosperity thinking. Admit that prosperity consciousness is good and emotionally healthy. The greatest challenges you're dealing with are in your psychological view of prosperity. Because once you've heard that Scripture wants you to prosper, if you're not prospering, if it's not coming forth, and I'm not saying it's going to happen overnight, but I believe you enter the nowness of it as soon as you hear it. You need to deal with the emotional and the psychological roadblocks. God is just as much a provider for his children as he is a healer. All right. And of course, we know that God is a healer. Now, let's talk some about the word substance. This is Bernard Smalls, and I'm sharing Millionaires of Genesis. And I feel like I Am has sent me to teach this. So I hope you're enjoying it. And if you are, share it with at least one other person. I call it each one, reach one. Just imagine if you just reach one person with whatever helps and prospers you. Now you are seeking to excel to the edifying of the ecclesia, which English calls the church. You want people to be edified, so share truth. All right, let's talk about the prospering word. Some even call this the magical word. But I know if you're a conventional Christian, you say, well, I don't believe in magic. But why do you go to Disney World? Oh, but that's different. Okay, I want to be nice. So we call it the prospering word. And the prospering word is substance. Remember, I said that your purpose in life, your purpose on this planet, is learning how to deal with invisible substance. And this substance is the foundation of all true wealth. Well, you've been teaching all this time, man, and you haven't even given us scripture yet. Well, let me give you scripture. What I've learned over the years is you just don't want to swamp people in scripture without understanding. Because scripture says in all you're getting, get understanding. And you get the scripture, but you need to understand the scripture. And sometimes getting less scripture and more understanding is more profitable than getting more scripture and less understanding. Selah. So let me give you some scripture. We do believe in scripture. Genesis 13:6 speaks of Abram and says the substance that they had was great. Speaking of Abram and his family, the substance was so great they had to separate, actually. Genesis 13:6 called this wealth substance. Psalm 105:21 refers to Joseph, ruler of all of Pharaoh's substance. Job 1 speaks of his vast wealth, speaking of Job, and it was described as substance. King David appointed a steward to take care of all of his substance in 1 Chronicles 28:1. Solomon said, honor Jehovah, honor the great I Am with your substance and the first fruit of all of your increase. And that's Proverbs 3:9-10. God gave Hezekiah very much substance. 2 Chronicles 32:29. The prophet said, I have become rich. I have found me out substance. Hosea 12:8. And in the New Testament, Scripture says the prodigal son, wasted his substance with riotous living. And that's Luke 15:13. So notice that all those references to wealth in Scripture, the word substance is used. So now understanding invisible substance is the key to prosperity. What am I saying here? You often, if you're not careful, self-sabotage your own wealth. Something's about to manifest, for instance, and you don't see it happening, so you start speaking words of fear, words of doubt, words of failure, words of it never works out for me. You're sabotaging your own wealth because you are now throwing up psychological roadblocks to substance. And now substance can't get through. And when substance can't get through, substance will not produce in your life. Is this making sense today? Now, these are the truths that many of you just need to commit to study, continual study. We've started the ANT radio, and you can visit that by going to theantradio.com or atlantanewthought.com. And it's 24 hours, 7 days a week, 24/7, as we say, of teaching this stuff. I've got a couple of listeners that said they just leave the station on all the time. Well, I'll tell you what, it's much better than the news and the political races. Okay? You want to hear what Sarah Palin is doing now with Donald Trump and, and Hillary and all. I'm not saying don't pay attention. I watch the news personally. I think I like, short insight into what's happening in the world. I don't sit there and inundate myself with hours and hours of it because I don't think that's healthy. But on the other hand, with this spiritual stuff, you've got to keep feeding it into your mind and into your heart and into your mouth and into your mind and into your heart, because you're dealing with tearing down psychological strongholds that may have been built because of sometimes leadership that may again have not behaved properly. And I think as leaders, it's important. I'm not, again, throwing any rocks. People that live in glass houses shouldn't throw bricks, I heard years ago. And I definitely live in a glass house. Not a literal glass house, but Jesus operated in such a way that he gave people no room for being legitimately offended at the way he handled money and resources. And I believe that's what we need in the planet today, All right. But again, with gentleness and the meekness of Christ, I approach this even with awe. Let's talk about this word substance from history. History teaches that the cultural classes among the Egyptians, the ancient Egyptians, knew that there was one invisible substance underlying all things. And they fully guarded this secret. The ancient Egyptians did, the wealthy did. And because they felt it would be unwise for the common laborers to learn that substance was used to create wealth. And even that substance was used to build the fabled pyramids. Vision is a part of substance. And when you have a vision of a pyramid, a vision of a facility, a vision of a building, a vision of a company today, a vision of a school, whatever, that vision is in the realm of substance. And someone had a vision to build those pyramids in Egypt. All right, the people with the vision employed the common laborers and kept them ignorant to the power of substance